We can
Hear
hear
me? We're
you.
good? All right.
Yes. Yep.
Fantastic. Well, I'm excited to be here with everyone. I wish I could be with you in person, but we have a big special education event that is happening in Milwaukee. So I am here in Wisconsin and I'm ready to dig in with you. And I want to make sure that if at any point in time, your question I know is going to go into an app or moderator's going to take care of it. However that's going to work, you can always find me at Catherine@catherinewitcher.com. I want to make sure that you know that my inbox is open to you at any time. Go ahead, send me an email about anything that we're going to cover. I'm excited to talk to you today about IEPs, best practice and real world solutions. I do want to share with you that I have experience in your Duke 15Q community. In fact, it's one of my clients that has a son who has Duke 15Q. That's how I got introduced to your organization, to your community. And I absolutely love working to create IEPs that make sense, both short-term and long-term for your child, for your entire family. You'll see there just a quick little bit about who I am. I'm a special needs sibling. That's my brother. He has Down syndrome. He is 43 years old, which means that I've been in the disability community my entire life, and navigating through the school system is difficult because we are constantly thinking about the future, right? We're constantly thinking, what is this going to look like? And what do we need to do now? And I can't wait to help you go through that. I have two programs that you may have heard of: Master IEP Coach, Special Education Inner Circle. There's always continuing education. We're going to touch on quite a bit of the information that you need, that you can experience as a special education insider. I'm inviting you guys into the conversation today so we can talk about how to truly prepare for the real world. We're going to talk about the difference between what is legally required in the law. Now, I'm not a lawyer and I'm not practicing law and I'm not giving you legal advice, but I have been working inside of the special education industry for about 25 years, which means that I know the law pretty well and I can tell you where to look to find the answers that you need. I can also help you distinguish what is required and what is not required. And I love going for the things that we can do together that may not even be legally required, but we can level up special education outcomes for your child. We're going to talk about how to develop IEP strategies to improve students' success in the real world. And we're going to do all of that through 12 must-ask IEP questions for every IEP team member. So one of the unique things when I'm talking about Master IEP coaches or Special Education Inner Circle or being here with you is that all of this information is for parents, teachers, admins, therapists. There's a lot of trainings that are for professionals only. There's a lot of trainings that are for parents only. But if we are expected to work together, then we need to learn together. We need to put those same tools in our toolbox so that when we come to the table, we're having a conversation as equal IEP team members. Who's up for that, right? Let's start to feel like an equal IEP team member and get your questions answered. Get the information that you need to make really good decisions. One of the things that I say often is that we need to get rid of the 1980s version of special education, meaning that the law has not changed a whole lot. I'm a certified special education teacher. I have not been in the classroom for a long time, but what I can tell you is that what I learned about special education as a special needs sibling, what I learned as a teacher many, many years ago, and what's happening right now, there has not been a lot of evolution, but you can help make a difference and make sure that we are writing goals that make sense. We're providing services that make sense. All of this is flexible. You just have to know what to ask for. That can be one of the hardest things, right? It's like, well, I think things are going right, or I feel like they're going wrong, but I don't exactly know what to do next. So I'm going to hop on over here to 12 must ask IEP questions. Now you have a copy of this wherever they put the handouts, the downloads, the things, the resources. You have a copy of this, so don't feel like you have to scribble down every word. What I'd love for you to do is to think about what your questions are. And if you want to, again, participate now, from what I hear, you guys can ask questions in the app, and the moderator may be able to look at that and ask some questions in real time, which I would love. If that's not possible, of course, you know where to find me, because I understand that you're going to have specific questions for your own child. What I love to start with is the purpose and findings of ideal law. I do this in every presentation. If you've ever heard me speak before, you've heard me say it. It hasn't changed, but it takes 2 seconds, and it really does start to put us all on the same page and to see through the same lens of what we should be getting out of special education. Most of us know that special education is supposed to provide a free and appropriate public education, and that's where it stops. That's where our conversation is. It stops, and we start to have these disagreements about this is appropriate and this is not appropriate. And then what I think is appropriate is different than what you think is appropriate, which is different than what the administrator thinks is appropriate, right? That's where we go. We go into this conversation worrying about what's appropriate, which we absolutely needed to find that. But right after, in the purpose and findings of ideal law, where it says a free and appropriate public education, it also says that the education needs to meet your child's unique needs and prepare them for further education, employment, and independent living. When you take those second 2 criteria, meet a child's unique needs, prepare for further education, employment, independent living, combine that together with an appropriate education, it really starts to define what are we supposed to be doing. So a lot of times we wait until the IEP meeting to talk about a lot of things. Now, anybody who's been through an IEP meeting before, which I'm assuming most of you have been, you know that it feels like a lot of decisions have been made before the IEP meeting. You don't necessarily know if you're going to have time to talk about all the things that you want to talk about, and you're not really sure what the follow-up or follow-through is going to be after that IEP meeting. So one of the things that I love to do with the parents and teachers that I'm working with, you right here in this room, is to say, okay, the first thing we need to do is start to do a brain dump. This is a brain dump where we say, these are all the things that I'm worried about, but where do they fit into this IEP priority matrix? Meaning, there are things that are important and urgent. Maybe it has to do with your child's health. Maybe it has to do with their safety. Maybe it has to do with some behaviors that are happening that makes it important and urgent. So if we're coming to an IEP table, like, this needs to be talked about. Then there are some things that are not important, but they're urgent, as in, okay, this doesn't have to take place at the IEP meeting. So they're not important for this hour or 2 hours that we have together, but they are important. We need to talk about it sometime within the next few days. Then we have, they're important, but not urgent. Oh, I have to make sure that we talk about this as a team. Again, doesn't necessarily need to be at the table. And then not important, not urgent. That's just, we need to work on some things. We need to start thinking about, and then you fill in the blank, thinking about how are we going to transition to middle school, but yet your child is in 4th grade, and transition to middle school doesn't happen until 6th grade. So it's not important right now. It will be, and it's not urgent. So we're going to put that on the to be discussed later list. This is really going to help you figure out how to prioritize the conversation at the IEP table. I want you to start to think about IEP meetings themselves. Before we get into the document, which are the 12 questions, IEP meetings themselves should not be the place for new information. It's not the place for us to have heated discussions. I know nobody wants that, but it happens, right? This should be the place where we think about, we have experts sitting at the table. We have parents, teachers, admins, therapists, all the different service providers that are experts. We should all have the data, the information, and the problems that we're going to be solving. We should all know those ahead of time. This is like a mastermind session where we're like, okay, we all know where the child's at. What are we going to do next? How are we going to implement this? How can we collaborate as a team? So if we're working on something such as a communication plan, if I'm looking through a teacher's perspective, what I see is needed in a communication plan is going to be different than the parent, which is going to be different than the speech therapist. But somehow we need to be at this IEP table and decide, what are the priorities? We know what the present levels are. We know what the difficulties are. Now, how are we going to work together? That's much different than just saying, here's where the child's at. Here's the goal for next year. Do you agree? This is about really honoring everybody's expertise and coming up with a plan. Now, to do that, there are some things that you need to know before you go into the meeting. Now, here's what's interesting. A lot of times, our professional IEP team members do not know the answers to these questions themselves. Again, I can tell you that from experience. That's not throwing anybody under the bus. That's the experience of being a brand new special education teacher. And right now, I'm working with hundreds of special education teachers that have experience from 1 to 20 years. And all of them have been through these 12 questions, and all of them had questions that they didn't know the answers to or that they've never addressed before. So I want to give you confidence that as we start to look at leaving some old school habits behind, leaving some conversations behind, meaning that negativity, that my side against your side, or looking at the school is never going to provide something appropriate. I want you to open up the conversation in these 12 areas. And I'm telling you, it absolutely can change your child's IEP. It can change your family's future, because when you build a great IEP, you're not just building it for the child, you're building it for the family. And I want you to have that perspective as a family member. I want you to express that to the team. The team needs to know that you're all in, because this is not just about your child reaching the next milestone. This is about so much more. So the first question that I want to make sure that we talk about is, do you know the full continuum of placements? Meaning, there's a section in your child's IEP, and we are not going in order. Okay, we're not going in order. I'm going to be jumping all around because these are all different conversations that we need to have. The other thing to know, let me just put a disclaimer in there, this is not state specific. So if you're saying, I don't know if this applies in my state, 100% it does. I work nationwide, and this absolutely applies everywhere. So do you know the full continuum of placements? There's this page on the back side of the IEP towards the end that talks about placement. There's typically 3 placements that were listed, and it's kind of like that Goldilocks and the 3 bears. Like, here's 3 different options. This one's too hot. This one's too cold. This one's just right. I want you to feel confident that you know what the full continuum of placements are inside of your district. A lot of times when I have parents start to open up this conversation, start to ask this question, I get the school kind of pushing back saying, you don't get to go shopping for your child's classroom. We as the educators are going to be making a recommendation. That's fantastic. You want their recommendation. You are not shopping for a classroom. You are looking to gain knowledge so you can be an equal IEP team member. So you can make sure that you're making the best decision possible to provide your child with an appropriate education. Sitting at the IEP meeting and reading a few descriptive words of each of the placements is not going to give you enough information to feel confident in a placement decision, especially if your child is moving to a different classroom, moving to a different school, moving to a different town. So you need to make sure, put that on your to-do list next time before your IEP meeting, that you know when you get to that section, you know what has been considered and that you need that information before. These are questions that happen before. This is not sitting at the IEP meeting, although if you had to sit at the IEP meeting and say, you know what, I can't agree to this right now because I'm unsure of what the other options were that the team did not recommend, and I need that knowledge to make an informed decision. So full continuum of placements, we got it, we're good. You're going to ask, you're going to know, you're going to see classrooms that would not be appropriate for your child. And that's okay, because listen, you don't know what's right if you don't know what's wrong. There's no way to know if this is a good fit if you don't know what is not a good fit. So this is a conversation that you need to have. It's a conversation that is not had very often, and you are going to be bringing a whole new light to what knowledge you're going to bring to the table as a parent and how you're going to participate in that discussion. Here's an awesome one that I love for the Duke 15Q families that I work with, because you guys have a lot of service minutes typically. We have a lot of OT, PT, speech, nursing, different things that are happening. And I want you to feel confident. Do you know how the current service minutes are being met? I never want you to assume that because your child has listed 60 minutes of speech, that your child is getting 60 minutes of direct services between them and the speech therapist. There's a good chance that some of those are group sessions. Some of those are going to be large sessions. Some of them are going to be small group sessions. Some might be in a speech therapy room. Some might be in the classroom. It might be push in, it might be pull out. Also, there might be some minutes that are used for consult time. And if there are not minutes for consult time, and your child needs any type of adaptive communication, which means I'm talking pictures like PECs or AAC devices, it takes time for a teacher and a team to prep those materials. And you can actually help the team by asking for consult minutes inside of your child's IEP, which then allocates time for the team to work on the materials and the things that your child needs outside of the direct services. You know, when I say old school and new school kind of habits, old school is we take care of 60 minutes of speech. Trust us, we'll send you some progress reports. New is let's figure out the best way that we can provide this appropriate education. So 60 minutes of speech, how would that look divided up? What's the environment? What's the ratio? What tools are needed? And do we need those consult minutes? So you're going to put that on your list because a lot of times that can make or break a child's progress in those areas is understanding what is happening. I'll just give you a little insight behind the scenes. A lot of times providers, although this is an uncomfortable situation, perhaps to have this conversation in some districts, they appreciate you helping to break down these minutes because their caseloads are so big that they have a hard time prioritizing and figuring out how to fit everything in. So if you're on top of it, you're not only advocating for your own child, but you're also advocating for that service provider, for that therapist, for that teacher to have that time that they need to help your child reach their goal. This is one of my favorite ones. Do you know what curriculum is being used? I just had this entire conversation, had a room full yesterday, a virtual room full of over 50 parents, teachers, admins, therapists. And I said, do you know what curriculum is being used? Out of those 50 parents that were in the room, and there, like I said, there were some teachers too, but I asked the teachers if they knew for their own students, and they're not their own students, for their own children who are students. And out of 50, I had 2 people that knew what curriculum was being used for their child. It is extremely important that you understand what curriculum your child is using, because I'll share with you what it's like to be a brand new teacher. And it's not just for brand new teachers. This happens to seasoned teachers also. But I got my first teaching job. I went walking into my classroom. I was so excited. I had my tables, chairs, desk, and a big green milk crate sitting on top of my teacher desk. I was so proud. And inside were all these stacks of papers. Those were the IEPs. Yes, I was a teacher before the digital age. And that was it. I didn't have flashcards. I didn't have curriculum. I didn't even have construction paper. I had to go through the IEP, figure out what supplies my students were supposed to have. I needed to talk to my boss to see where I could scrounge up what I needed. And I was not provided the materials that I should have had. Now, there was a parent of one of my students who knew this was going to happen. In fact, she had been burned before. She was a feisty parent, and I loved her. And she came to me and she said, do you have everything that you need? Well, as a new teacher, I'm like, yeah, like I'm working on it. And she says, no, like, do you have everything that you need? My child needs, and her child was specifically promised direct instruction in an ABA style curriculum. I did not have those tools. I can tell you that she advocated to my boss, and I did get those tools. You as a parent, you have the power to bring together a team. You don't have to advocate in a way that breaks things apart. You have to know what questions to ask so you can help get your child into the right placement with the right service minutes, with an awesome curriculum to help move your child from where they are to where they need to be. Now, to do that, to get from where you are to where you need to be, you absolutely need to know about data, right? That's like our golden word in special education. It's like, where's the data? You get a progress report that has those check boxes, making progress, making progress, making progress. Where's the data? We're not saying that the child's not making progress. We don't have to argue about it. But old school special education, 1980s special education is just like, trust me, trust me. And here's your progress report. And this is what I legally have to give you. Okay. So legally, your child gets a progress report at the same intervals as a report card of the school district. However, I want to level that up. I want you to actually see the data. I want you to see that, like the hard data, raw data, like tally marks and things. I want you to see what's happening. I want this to be an open conversation. Why are we still hiding information, especially after this past year that we have? Why are we trying to hide information of like, here's the data that we took and here's, what's really happening? Where are we trending? We're trending up with, we all know as parents, right, that our children don't make perfect progress. That doesn't happen. We're not expecting that. So be open with your team that you really want to know what data is being taken for each goal. And you'd like that data shared on a regular basis. And you can come up with a plan to make that happen between you and your team. So in your IEP, in every goal, there is definitely some type of documentation within that goal that says how the data is going to be collected. I love to go one step ahead and just saying, like, can I have the data? I want you to go, look, let's just say that we're working on a communication goal, that we're using some type of alternative communication. Maybe it's going to be pictures, and that the child is supposed to, whatever they're supposed to do, making requests or making choices or whatever they're doing with that communication. And it says 3 out of 4 trials. Then I want to ask, can I please see the data regarding the trials for this goal? It usually says something like a checklist or a chart. For some students, it's going to be a work portfolio. Some it might be teacher observations. Whatever the way they're going to collect data, you can use that common language that's already written into the IEP, and you can ask for that specific data. All right, this might be like the gold standard of how to switch up an IEP and make it feel more like it should as a parent. So there's a section in your IEP. I'm going to give you homework. If you do nothing else, you're like, this was all great, but it's too overwhelming. I can't ask all these questions right now. I've got other things going on. I 100% understand. So let me give you one thing that you can do that I promise you can do. Go into your child's IEP and go look for the parent input statement. It will not be called a parent input statement. The reason I use that term parent input statement is because when I'm working across the country, that's a great general term. We all understand what that would be, right? It's where the parent has had some input in the IEP. For most of you, that section is going to be called parent educational concerns. And inside of that parent educational concerns, I really want you to look at that and see, does it reflect your concerns and your desired outcome for your child? Most parent input statements say something like, Mom is concerned that child has not made progress in making requests at home. Or it might be something simple like, parents are worried about child's independent self-care. Now, those are okay things to have, but is that really all of the concerns that you have? No. Now, is it setting a standard for what you need from the IEP? No. The worst one that I ever see is when it says Mom and dad have no concerns at this time. Are you kidding me? What parent of a child with a disability has no concerns for even 5 minutes of the day? That is not true. Okay. So a clear parent input statement, old school, 1980s version, is that you're sitting at the table and they say, hey, mom or dad, do you guys have any other concerns right now? No? Okay. All right, we're good. Oh, yep, I heard that. I wrote down that concern. Good. All right. The way that I want you to participate and level up and get out of some old school habits and become a leader in your child's education is to create a clear parent input statement. That means that when you get, here's your strategy, when you get that IEP meeting notice 10 days ahead of time, and it says, you're invited to your child's annual review. It's going to take place on September 15th at 10 a.m. Can you be there? Your response back should, yes, I will be there. And please see attached parent concerns to be addressed at the meeting. You can actually attach a Word document. It's going to have a beautiful parent input statement that says we are concerned about the following. That's where you can document your concerns. No surprises at the IEP table, okay? Right? We're going to look for solution-based IEP meetings. So here's my concerns. Then I want you to add in the vision for your child. I'll give you an example of a family that I worked with. Her daughter had some type of disability that was going to continue to progress and take away her daughter's skills that she had gained. And it was something that they had to realize that 10, 15, 20 years from now, things were going to look very, very different. So the parent did not want the typical goals that might lead to, let's say, a stereotypical employment for a person with disability. She was setting up her daughter's life to make sure that she was able to access the community, that she was able to build relationships with people, that she could go out to lunch, like her mom and her and some neighbors, and be able to go to a restaurant and be at the table and just participate and do life. In fact, she actually used the term, I want my daughter to be able to be a lady that lunches, right? Like the ladies who lunch. I want her to be able to do that. Now, do I want the independent living skills? Yes. And there's communication and there's friendships and there's independence and there's all those things. And she laid it out. But when she told me, she says, listen, I need my daughter's IEP to, and she described this ladies who lunch. I went, yes, that's awesome. Now I'm going to work with another family who's going to say, I want my child to hold meaningful employment that will help financially support both needs and wants. So it doesn't matter. There's no right or wrong. It's what you want. I'm a special needs sibling. So there are a lot of people in the Down syndrome community that are all about helping a child become independent in their in living outside of the home. That was not a goal of my parents. My parents made the decision due to my brother's medical needs that he was going to live at home for as long as they could take care of him. And he's 43 and he lives with my mom right now. My dad has passed. He's with my mom. So, and we have further plans, and that's at, when it's the school, though, when it's the school that's setting the vision for what's appropriate, you get a very standard, non-individualized, okay, this is what we work towards because we assume that's what every family wants. Don't ever let the school assume what you're looking for long-term, and you can change your long-term vision. This is not written in stone, everyone. So this parent input statement, this is where you don't have to know how to write the IEP goals. You have to set the benchmark of like, this is where we're going. And then you have your experts at the IEP table that can say, okay, we got your parent concerns. We hear you that you would like your child to have meaningful employment. Your child's now in 8th grade and we need to get ready for high school. So we're going to use this next year to work on XYZ, whatever that is. for your child. So when they transfer into high school, they are ready to whatever that program may look like. And then remember, I started with a full continuum of placements. You absolutely need to know what those full continuum placements are. Maybe you know what's going to happen for 8th grade, but you need to start doing the prep work for high school. Absolutely. That's all part of the IEP process. But this parent input statement can be life-changing. And I mean that. I've seen it. I've seen entire IEPs go from basic, standardized, almost cut and paste type IEPs to being truly individualized, where a family's quality of life is improved within months. That the family's now going out to dinner, that they're going to Target, that there's more calm and peace at home because a child is being more independent in their own home environment. It is possible. It starts here. All right. Let's talk for a minute about present levels of performance. If we're going to talk about the parent input statement and say this is where we want to go, we got to get real clear on where is your child at. Present levels of performance are everywhere inside of an IEP document, and I need you to look at those and say, yeah, my child can do that. Now, keep in mind that a present level performance should not be based on what a child can't do. Meaning the child can't count, the child can't read, the child can't tie their shoes, the child can't go to the bathroom independently. That's telling me a lot of things as a teacher, but what it's not telling me is what can they do? The child can recognize numbers 1 through 5. The child can initiate that they need to go to the restroom. The child can. I need a starting point as a teacher. Don't tell me all the things that a child can't do, because then when I go to set up my classroom, when I go to help this child make progress, I got to spend a whole lot of time figuring out, okay, I know all the things that the team says they can't do, but where are they actually at? So I want you to think about this as, we call it like read it to your neighbor test. Meaning if you were to read this to your neighbor, a present level performance to your neighbor, would they understand what your child can do? It should be that simple. I should be able to pick up your child's IEP and say, okay, I could go shopping on Amazon and get all the tools that I needed to help this child succeed because I know exactly where they're at in their present levels of performance. So this strategy of making sure that you're very clear, it connects to all the things of knowing what the data is. It connects to knowing what the curriculum is. It connects to all of these pieces and say, okay, this is where we're at. So I want you to make sure that as you're going forward in your child's education, that you're starting to lead with that parent input statement. And you're like, okay, if this is where we're going, this is where we're at, and get very clear on that. All right, how are accommodations and modifications being implemented? Again, in everyone's IEP, there's a list of services, support services, accommodations and modifications. It's going to be called a lot of different things, but basically these are the things that say like child will have frequent sensory breaks, access to frequent sensory breaks. What does that mean? I don't know, because my version of that is different than your version of that. And we need to get these accommodations and modifications defined. You need to know what's actually happening. And many IEP documents, we see lists and lists and lists of all the things that could be available to this child. Meaning, I don't know if I've hardly ever seen an IEP that doesn't have things like child has access to extended time on tests. Okay. What does that mean? Do they need it? And is it being used? How is it being offered? Like, there's a lot of questions. So a lot of times I get calls from parents and they'll say something like, my child is having meltdowns every day when they get home from school. It seems like they're holding it together at school, but at home it's just a mess. And I feel like, my child's sensory needs aren't being met, or I feel like there has to be something happening at school. It's just not right in there. One of the first places I'm going to look is accommodations and modifications and say, are they getting these breaks? What does it mean? Or if it says, we'll be using alternative communication in all learning environments. Current communication methods include, are those being used? If a child's voice is being stolen during the day, and that's what happens when the team's not trained, we'll talk about that in a little bit, or if they don't have access to their tools, then negative things will happen. for the child during the school day and after the school. So accommodations and modifications, please go look at those, make sure that you understand those and get involved in those. Old school habit, way back in the day, accommodations and modifications, we just said teachers know what they're doing, which they do, okay? Teachers can make all of those decisions. They can make collaborative decisions, and I'm sure it will all get done. That's a lot. I'm constantly training teachers on how special education teachers are not the only teachers involved in accommodations and modifications. Let's just say that your child needs a visual schedule. I'm sure if I was in the room with you right now, I could see all the head nods. Yes, we got visual schedules. If your child is participating in a general education class, such as PE, art, music, or reading, math, science, or any type of a school assembly, the playground, is their visual schedule like it's implemented in the special education environment? Is that visual schedule being implemented in all environments? And does the certified professional in that area, in that classroom, do they know how to use it? These are things that you need to get involved in. If you're going to have your child's IEP work throughout the entire school day, we need to make sure that the entire team and all the adults that are guiding your child's education are absolutely involved in the little details that make a huge difference. Now, here's my question for you. Do you need any more data so you can make some great decisions in this upcoming year? IEP decisions are only as good as the data that they're based on, meaning that if I have weak data, I'm going to make a weak decision, meaning I'm going to make the best decision that I can, but it's not going to be perhaps the best decision that I could make if I had better information. I never want a parent to say, I made a decision 5 years ago and nobody told me whatever this missing information is. So I'm not confident that was the right decision. Do we always make the perfect decision as parents? No, I'm a mom. I know. Okay. We don't always make the perfect decisions. Do we want to feel confident and say, I made the best decision possible with the information that I had? And I had a lot of information. Yes, that's where we need to be. Here's a fantastic one that is extremely underutilized. Does anyone need further training to make the IEP happen? What that means is inside of your IEP, there is a section that says something like personnel training. There's a section that talks about what further information does the team need to execute this IEP. So if your team needs training in health, safety, behavior, communication, academic strategies, any of those areas, anything that is needed to help a child reach their IEP goals, that training can go into the IEP, including training for the general education teachers, including training for parents. Absolutely. Parents, gen ed teachers, paraprofessionals can be included into the personnel training section. Now, the training has to be based on the legal side, okay, it says the access to training that will assist the child in reaching their goals. So for example, let's go with an AAC device. We've got the iPad, we've got the special app, we're doing our AAC protocols, but when the device goes home, it's not being used the same way as it is at school. Maybe that's because the family has not been had the training that they need to replicate what is happening at school. Maybe it's the other way. Maybe it's being used at home effectively, but at school they can't get the same response. So there needs to be a training. So I want you to go look and find this section in the IEP and see if there's anything listed in the personnel training and start brainstorming, get creative. This is how we level up. This is how we use the IEP strategically to make sure that it is individualized for your child. Do we need to explore further options for inclusion? That's where I say inclusion is an experience. not a place. And I want you to let that just like sink in. My brother was excluded in the public schools. My brother went to a therapeutic day school and was fully included. Me, and of course you might say, well, of course, like it was like he was included in the school because it was a school that was made for all students with, with disabilities. And that I have seen special education classrooms where not every child is included in the classroom activities or in the school community as a whole. I've seen districts or schools where there's a school-wide assembly happening, but the special education classroom is not invited. It happens. So when I say inclusion, I am not talking about the standard, let's take a child who learns differently, plop them into a general education class in a desk in the back of the room while the aide pulls down a chair from the corner, sets it next to them, stays glued to their side and say, this is inclusion. It is not. Inclusion is when a child is met where they're at. Inclusion happens from the minute that a child steps onto the school campus to the time that they leave on that bus or in the carpool lane. It's about being included in the hallway and the library, in their own classroom, and in the school-wide activities. It's about figuring out where are a child's strengths for who they are and how can those be connected inside of the school community. Inclusion is not a time where we try our hardest skills, meaning if a child struggles with noise overload, we do not try inclusion in music. We don't do it. We find a better place. If a child loves books, and the classroom across the hall that's the same grade level of them as them, the teacher has 20 minutes of independent reading, small group, like the students are allowed to kind of group off and flip through their books, have really small talk. Kind of, some teachers even call it like Starbucks time, okay, where there's like no talking, but it's like a Starbucks type environment. They might have their drink and their snack and their independent work. That might be a fantastic time for inclusion. Do not ever think that inclusion opportunities always need to happen in the PE environment. Guys, think about it. Gym class. The rules change all the time. The game changes all the time. It's high energy. It's loud. It's chaotic. And most likely the gym teacher has not been trained to support your child, which means your child's dependent on the aide, which then excludes them from that classroom in the gym. It takes a lot of work to make PE work as truly inclusive environment. I want you to start thinking about inclusion differently because your child is part of the real world community. They should be part of their school community also. Let's find your child's strengths, their preferences, the things they like, the things they're able to do, and help them connect with others in their school community who like the same things. Do we need to explore more technology? We all know over the past year that technology had, it was frustrating and saved the day, right? Or it was just frustrating. I'm not sure where you fall at with all of this, but what we have seen for many, many years is that special education is far behind when it comes to technology in our schools. It's just something that we need to really figure out. Does your child need any type of different technology? Here's the thing. How many of you guys are walking around with your phone all the time attached to you, right? Yep, your child probably will be too. Do you only use a paper planner? No, some of you might use a paper planner. I use a paper to-do list, kind of like a daily paper planner, but everything's in my phone. All right. So this whole like hybrid digital and paper, that's a real life skill. Time management, timers, reminders, all of those things can be done digitally. We're working on those all the time in special education. 3 more minutes, the bell's going to ring. Let's transition. We can be using technology to really promote independence and our executive functioning skills. So this is something that you definitely want to take a look at going forward to see how is technology able to support your child's independence and reaching their goals in all different domains. Now, here's the big last question. I'm looking at the IEP goals inside of your IEP. Let's just pretend you and I are sitting at Starbucks and I'm going through and I see the math goal that talks about, we'll be able to count out correct change at Target. Stop it. Are you counting your pennies at Target? No, you're not. And neither should your child. I'm not saying I don't want your child to learn about money. I'm just saying that an IEP goal doesn't need to be about counting penny, nickels, dimes, and quarters. Okay? So I want you to look at every time you read an IEP goal, I want you to ask yourself, do I use this skill as an adult? If the answer is no, you need to think real hard if this is something that needs to take up precious space inside of the IEP. The IEP should not be crammed with a bunch of goals because your child will be overwhelmed, will shut down, will not make progress in big leaps if there's just a bunch of hodgepodge miscellaneous goals that are not strategically prioritized for what is going to work both short-term and long-term for the real world. So, things like telling time on an analog clock. My brother knows how to tell time on an analog clock. He wears my dad's watch. Okay. So if I say, Robert, what time is it? He'll look at his, he'll say 12:50. And then he picks up his phone and goes, yeah, 12:50. Double checks himself with his phone. So again, am I saying that your child's not allowed to learn an analog clock? Am I saying like, oh my gosh, like let's get the teacher in trouble if there's an analog clock worksheet, or, oh gosh, those yellow clocks as a teacher, if anybody was a teacher, you've seen these in the classroom, there's yellow, it's got red hands, and like, let's go ahead and tell. That's fine, but does it need to be a goal that we take data on? No. So I want you to really think about what goals are in your child's IEP that you do not use in the real world. Answering WH questions, are those used? Yes. Where are you going? Who are you going with? When are you going to be back? What are you getting? Right? All the time. WH questions, so important. Should we just have one goal that says, we'll answer all WH questions? No, don't lump them all together. I need to know, what does your child know about the whats and the whos, the whens? How are they going to answer? Verbally, pointing? I want to break them down. I want them to make sense. Do we all use reading skills? Yes. Do we all need to memorize, like, I don't know, the president, the order of the presidents? Nope. Okay. So there are things that I want to make sure when we're talking about science. If your child has science, cause and effect, is that important? Yes. Do we need to have it in a way of like, we'll memorize the periodic table? I'm telling you, this is all from experience. And I'm telling you that there are students that had extremely inappropriate goals that I've seen over the last 20 years. And I'm giving you some of the extreme examples where a child is still learning how to self-advocate for themselves, that they need a break, yet their science goal is talking about the periodic table because that's what the other sixth graders are doing. Stop it. That's not the place for, the IEP is not the place for that goal. If we want to work on that in the classroom, that's great. But this is a limited amount of space, as in we have a small amount of time in the school day. We only have so much time with a certified teacher, and we want to focus on the best of the best to make sure that the child is prepared for further education, employment, independent living. Now, I want you to ask all questions for every meeting. That would be my ideal. I would love that. But I want you to think about the things that if we were in person, I would have made you do that brain dump in the beginning and put down all of those things that are on your mind, all the things that you want to take care of. Then I would have went through these 12 questions with you and I'd say, okay, now pick 3. What are the 3 things that you need to make sure that you know before the next IEP meeting? Do you need to go look at your parent input statement? Yes, please put that down as one. What are the other things that as I was going through those 12 questions that you were like, yes, Technology, or yes, I need to check if these are real world IEP goals, or oh my goodness, I didn't know that I could ask all those questions about the service minutes. I want to know what are your 3 questions that you're going to go get answers to. And when you get those answers, put that into your parent input statement or what you're working towards so you can bring the team together and use their expertise to make awesome decisions for your child. When you have this handout, just so you know, you will get, it's just catherinewitcher.com. I shared with you guys before that you can find me at catherinewitcher.com. You can drop an email question to me. I'm here for you. I absolutely want to help you make sure that your child is prepared for further education, employment, and independent living. And on that note, if our moderator's around, our room monitor there, I'm at the end of my worksheets. I'm at the end of the information. So you guys let me know what we need to do next.
There's no questions on the app apparently,
Okay.
but apparently there are a lot of questions in the room. So
Okay.
Good afternoon. Thank you so much for coming. Can you see me or can you hear me?
I can hear you.
Okay. For those of us who are you offering these days consulting services?
So they can send me emails. So I've worked with you guys for a long time. So if you guys have questions, go ahead and drop me an email and then I'll help either give you one of my resources, or if you need further help beyond that, I can share with you what those are.
Okay. So the way to get a hold of you is through your website?
Yeah, so you can hop over to catherinewitcher.com. There's like a contact me. You can drop a question in the box or just send me a direct email. And I have a ton of free resources. And of course that there's other options beyond that too. So I will do my best to get you everything that you need if you reach out directly to me.
Okay, quick question for you. Do you oftentimes see ABA within the school therapists ever in the school settings for Duke 15 kids?
Yes. It's possible. It's different in every district on how that's done. And ABA itself is just considered a generic term. So if we're looking at like a BCBA being involved or somebody who's professionally trained in ABA direct instruction to help a child with their behaviors or academics or independent living, that all of that is possible. So yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's specifically what I'm talking about. I do see some hostility by schools about that issue, about having a BCBA in the classroom. I also hear from ABA centers that insurance won't allow them to bill in a school setting.
Correct. So it has to be agreed upon service that is provided through the IEP. So if you're asking for your personal BCBA to be involved in the school process, that's a different topic versus having a BCBA or a behavior professional that's a district employee or contracted by the district. So 2 different avenues, 2 different negotiation strategies to get that implemented.
Gotcha. Thank you.
Hi, Catherine. Hi, Catherine. Another question. So this is basic IEP stuff, but how does it look different when you enter the transition years? And especially for kids that, will never truly be independent. Like how do you visualize what the endpoint should be like? And how do you build an IEP transition plan? And who do you get involved?
I love that question so much. So transition plans, just so everybody knows, when they start varies upon your state. So the federal law says age 16. For example, in the state of Illinois, it's age 14 and a half. So just know that when your child does become of transition age, there's an additional section of the IEP we get started on it. And that's really the first time that you start to see the categories of further education, employment, and independent living. There'll be specific goals in that. There's also community organizations that should be invited. So your Department of Rehab Services, again, that's something different in each state. The bottom line, it's Department of Rehab Services. Might have a different acronym in your state. They absolutely should be involved with the school. Now, when I say that, I'm not saying that it's common knowledge or that they are often invited, or that they often show up. This becomes another kind of negotiation strategy of that we have to decide, who do you want involved? And again, when I gave that example of the parent who said, listen, I want my child to be part of the community, have relationships, have friendships. She's not going to have meaningful employment as maybe somebody else might have those goals. That's okay. You can work with the community organization and your school. Now, I'm never going to say settle, and I'm never going to say, have low expectations. Those are all different expectations. So I want you to know that you can take control of that. So what should that endpoint look like? That's where I say that parent input statement comes into play to decide with, I want my child to have leisure skills that they enjoy and can be independent in. I want my child to have perhaps some meaningful volunteer work so they can be part of the community. So get creative, because nothing's off limits. Everything is open for a conversation.
We have a question from the app, and it says, how can I advocate to get a mini trampoline in my child's classroom for a sensory break?
So a mini trampoline into the classroom for a break. The reason that that's difficult is because that most likely is going to get the initial pushback of, well, that's going to disrupt the other students. That doesn't fit into the classroom flow. Now, what that mini trampoline provides for the child from an occupational therapy point of view, can that be obtained in a different way? And I never want to advocate for one specific tool in that, because if that tool stops working or doesn't work, then it's like, well, you asked for it, it's there, we did that. So I really want you to think a little bit higher level and say, okay, my child would need a mini trampoline because, and talk to an occupational therapist, and perhaps that could be one of several solutions. And maybe that mini trampoline is going to be blocked off behind a divider if there is an issue in the classroom. I'm not sure exactly what the classroom setup is. Just be flexible in getting to the end result of your child getting that sensory input that they need.
Yes, I got another question here. So what is the best approach when you get a lot of pushback for getting the services that you feel like your child needs? I know
Data.
that's general, but
I know it's data. So here's the thing. You have to connect everything back to how what you're asking for is going to prepare a child for further education, employment, independent living. I don't care if they're 5 years old or 15 years old. Okay, so there's a skill such as, let's do independent leisure skills. That's a skill that a child needs now, later, and forever. We all need to figure out how to use downtime and how to, have independent leisure skills. And so if you're negotiating for something, I want to pair that up with examples for how that is important in the school setting and for further education, employment, independent living. I'm going to use data to back things up. Every time I'm negotiating something, there has to be data. Show me the data, show me the policy, my two favorite terms. And here's the thing, remember, I work with schools too. I tell schools all the time, be prepared, have the data, have the policy. If you're going to say no to something, have the data, have the policy. If you're going to be a parent who's going to be negotiating for something, know the data, know the policy. A lot of times the things that you're getting pushback on, there is no policy. It's simply an old school habit.
I think that's all the questions we have.
Fantastic. It was
Thank you so
great
much.
working with everyone today.